Urban explorers are braver than me because they can sometimes stumble upon terrifying things, and I would not be able to handle that. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we're counting down our list of the top 10 disturbing discoveries found inside abandoned buildings. Coming in at number 10 is Rocking Cradle. This Reddit user said, "I was exploring a large abandoned hospital complex and came across a house on the property. I assumed it once belonged to the head of the hospital and his family, as the complex was incredibly isolated and a self-sustaining place. We climbed through a downstairs window, and the house is in fairly decent shape and mostly empty, all apart from an old cradle. It looked Victorian, like it had been lifted off an old-fashioned pram or stroller. Very gothic looking, if I'm honest, and definitely not the kind of thing you would see anymore. We walked past and made some standard 'that's creepy' comments and quickly checked out the rest of the house. We have to go back through the cradle room to get out the window, and as we walk in, I stop in my tracks. My friend asks what's wrong and then sees for himself. The cradle has moved several feet and is rocking. There's no breeze, and even if there was, that thing is heavy enough to have left slight scratches in the wooden floor. We heard and saw no one else in the area, and I still cannot explain it." Yeah, that's a no from me. Ugh. Number 9. Organs. This user said, "We went to an abandoned woman's prison that's pretty much fallen apart by now. Me and some friends were walking by moonlight and occasionally our phones. We're walking the path, and right smack in the middle are several piles of organs from small animals. Like 6 to 7 piles, hearts, lungs, kidneys, and possibly the liver. They all looked pretty fresh, they weren't decayed, and they were still pretty moist. Now there wasn't any blood around or obvious tracks/footprints. We noped out of there with quickness that night." Then when people in the comments of this post responded saying maybe it was an owl or hunters, they replied by saying, "I don't think so. This was close to a production plant residential area, like so close to a stray bullet could strike a house. But even the best hunter spills blood or hair around. Plus there weren't any tracks/prints." Yeah, that sounds extremely unnerving and downright scary. Number 8. Untouched Property. This user said, "When I was younger, I broke into a very small abandoned house near my uncle's cottage. The owner of that house was the man who had passed some 20 to 25 years ago. The whole place was completely untouched, so I'm pretty sure the last people to be in there before me were the EMTs who locked up after they took away the body. The bed where the guy passed was unmade and messy. The pillow and the blanket were half eaten by moths. Same with the clothes hanging in the forest. Floor was covered in rat poop. There were dirty dishes in the sink, which were stained yellow. On the bedroom table, there was an open book and some others stacked next to it. Other than that, it seems like the guy was completely broke since there was nothing else in the house. No photos or documents, no TV or radio, no extra furniture. The doors and windows were locked, so no one else had been there. The man had no relatives, according to my uncle, and was only 45 to 50 years old. Now that's just absolutely crazy that the property just sat there lost in time." Number 7. Possessed Music Box. This online user said, "We were out exploring around 11:30 at night in the middle of a forest. We stumbled upon an old abandoned house, and it didn't seem too creepy at first until we stepped foot inside. Everything was pitch black and boarded off. Turning on our phone flashlights revealed scattered all across the floors in every room, along with tons of dolls. Now the creepy part was when we ventured into the basement. The moment I turned the corner, went down the stairs, and looked in the basement, I heard a music box start playing from the other end of the room. Needless to say, the three of us bucked it out of there as fast as we could." Yeah, music boxes are inherently creepy, but that, nope. Number 6. The Ritual. This explorer said, "There was an old brick building in the middle of my hometown. It was gutted by fire, but the walls and ceiling remained. This place was huge, and the property was all overgrown and wooded. Now the place had been abandoned for decades, and whenever we went exploring there, it was mostly inside the building. We decided to explore the woods once, and they were very dense and difficult to push through. We found a clearing inside, and it was almost perfectly circular. There were logs arranged around the circle, a large star made of sticks in the middle. There were figures of people made of sticks and twigs hanging from nearby branches. I have no idea what the place was, but it was the creepiest thing I've ever seen. Now, this sounds exactly like a scene from the movie Blair Witch. I hope they didn't touch anything and just left, because I don't think they'd want to be terrorized by whatever put that there. Number 5, the Raven. This user said we went to a large abandoned federal prison. It was a sanctioned tour, but it was dark and creepy, and there were physical safety issues. Went through the psych ward and the infirmary as the last 2 stops of the tour, and then we were all allowed to just wander freely. My group of 4 went back to the psych ward. This time, there was a huge raven dead in the middle of the floor on the first room of the psych ward. Its head was at a crazy angle, and it was lying in a puddle of blood that was still wet. Now, all windows were closed and intact, and we left and re-entered through the only door that led to the rest of the building. Nobody saw or heard anything like a bird, and it was the middle of the night, so it wouldn't have just been flying around. Made me think they're probably creepy squatters who weren't happy about the overnight tours, which had just started the week before, so it really gave me the creeps. Number 4, Carcasses. My college folklore professor told us the story of how she and her friend were working for a professor while they were in grad school in the 70s, doing research on ghost stories in a southern Indiana small town. They checked out an old abandoned farmhouse and barn, but didn't find anything interesting in the barn and decided to check out the farmhouse. This place is missing all the windows, the doors are hanging off the hinges, and there's lots of leaf coverage and dirt in the entryway. But further into the house, it's clean. Too clean. My father heard her friend shriek, followed by the cry, "There's a leg." So she runs back to see and finds what looks like an animal leg sticking out over the top of the stairs. They go up to see and find a fresh pig carcass, head missing and hind legs bound by barbed wire, but otherwise intact. It had been there maybe a few days. But then they see more pig carcasses lined up heading down the hall, each one laying in the exact same position and bound by wire, but in varying stages of decomposition. The room at the end of the hall was missing the door, and they could see the pigs go straight into the room. In the room, there was a circle of all the pigs' heads. There were 6 total. They decided it was time to get the hell out, but when they were walking back to their car, a beater truck pulled up with 2 men in it. They just stared at my professor and her friend, who tried to explain why they were there and apologize. She said after several minutes, the driver said, "Ain't no problem," and gave her a really creepy smile, then backed out of the driveway. Now, they relayed what they saw to their head professor when they got back into town, who then informed the local authorities. Cops took an hour to get out there, but said they didn't find anything but maybe some stains, but that the women had probably stumbled upon the local Satanist they'd been having problems with. Honestly, those 2 women are lucky that nothing happened to them. Number 3, the voice. This explorer said, "I live in Scotland and read about the legend of Swanee Bean. History says his family lived in a cave and ended the lives of those unfortunate enough who passed by unaccompanied. Once dead, they would rob them and eat their bodies. This went on for over 20 years, so they acquired quite a reputation. Living not so far from the caves, I decided to visit. I found where the cave was, and it is the most beautiful place but completely silent, except for the waves rolling onto the beach. I walked into the cave and looked around. Everything was cool. 10 minutes or so after being there, I decided to leave and walked out. I left the cave, but I had walked about 6 feet when I heard a woman's voice. It wasn't a whisper or indistinct, but a plain woman's voice from behind me. All it said was, 'Help me.' I turned expecting someone to be there, but saw nothing. I walked back the way I had come from the calling out and asking who it was, but got no answer. I spent about 5 minutes looking and was getting ready to leave when I heard 'Help me' again coming from the cave. I spent about 20 minutes more searching, but I found nothing. What I heard was real, and I cannot explain it. Number 2, the dripping noise. This user said, "I went to an abandoned old hall ballroom building with my friends. We went there fairly often over the years, always checking out some other areas of the building. One thing I remember about that building was that eventually we would always start to hear something like a leaky faucet dripping water into a basin. But the thing was, the sound was never there when we entered entered the place. It always started after we had been there for a while, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 40, sometimes 90, but eventually the leaky faucet sound would be heard throughout the building. It usually started off slowly and then increased in speed. Now we were totally immersed in the location and so freaked out by this dripping that we would leave as soon as it became louder and more obnoxious. At one point we found a lonesome wash basin in one of the hallways and it was dripping indeed. We thought we had found the perpetrator. We pulled a balloon over the faucet so the dripping would leave us alone for the day. The thing is, about 5 minutes after we did that and had continued on to another part of the place, the dripping started again. Freaked out, as usual, we left. And coming in at number 1 is Chainsaw Clown. This user said, one night we headed through tunnels and we saw some creepy graffiti, including an ornate piece that said hell with an arrow pointing down a corridor. Our group of about 10 said let's go to hell and we went down. The graffiti got more and more horror show-like as we traveled, and sometime later we turned a corner. I'm towards the back of the group, so some of this is secondhand, but I heard my buddy Ken yell, "Holy sh!" and the crowd starts surging back towards me, and I hear a chainsaw starting and revving. Ken says when he turned the corner, there were a bunch of these Satanist weirdos gathered in a dead end, all in costume like they just spilled out of a Halloween show. One of them started a chainsaw and they all rushed at the group. Cue to the next few hours, alternatively wandering lost and hiding in the tunnels, while periodically hearing the sound of a chainsaw in adjacent tunnels. Now I suppose I'll never know if these clowns were actually psycho or if they just thought it was cool to scare people that ventured into their tunnels, but at any rate, once we all found our way out, it was a quiet caravan home. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 disturbing discoveries found inside abandoned buildings. Which one do you think is the creepiest? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I'm your host, Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.